Guys, so in this video, we are going to explore evaluating expressions. And our objective today will be that you will be able to substitute values into an expression and apply order of operations to simplify. So we're just building on what we did yesterday and just continuing to use our order of operations. But now we're going to throw some variables in there in which we know the value of the variable. So the first question says, what do we call a number that we don't know the value of in problems? And that is a variable. And it's called that because the value can change or vary, if you will. Hence the name variable. The value would be different depending on the problem that you have. So if I tell you that a value of a variable, what could you do to solve the problem? For instance, if you know that an unknown value x equals 4, and I want to know what x plus 7 is, what is the value? So all you're going to do is you're going to substitute in for the values you know. So if I know that x is equal to 4, and my expression is x plus 7, I'm going to use parentheses around the 4 to then add it to 7, which will give me 11. So when x equals 4, x plus 7 equals 11. That variable could change, and then the value of our expression would change as well. Suppose there are two unknown values, x and y, but I tell you that x equals -5 and y equals 11. What would be the value of x, y? So when remembering that anytime we have two things right beside each other like that, that means that we're multiplying. So we're going to do -5 times 11, and we're going to get -55. If x and y changed, then the value would change as well. The biggest thing you want to remember is when you are substituting value for a variable, you must always use parentheses. When everything is positive, it's not as important, but when it's negative, it makes a huge difference, as we're about to see in just a few minutes. So it's important that you always use parentheses around the value that's being substituted in. It also helps those numbers stand out so you know if you're doing multiple problems with the same variable or the same problem with multiple different variable values, then you can see where to replug in. So let's look down here at number 1. They're telling us that x is equal to 5 and y is equal to 2. I'm going to use my pink to be x and teal to be y. So what I'm going to do for number 1 is I'm going to plug in for 5 for x everywhere I see an x and 2 everywhere I see a y. So I see that I have a x squared plus an x, and then minus 12, and then divided by 2 squared. Then we just use our order of operations. So grouping symbols, exponents, multiply, divide, and then add, subtract. Starting with my grouping symbols, I see that I don't actually have any grouping symbols that are actual grouping symbols. They're parentheses, but they're just my substituted values. So I'm going to cross that off. Then I'm going to look for any exponents. So I see that I have a 5 squared and I have a 2 squared. Since they're not together, I can go ahead and do them together. So 25 plus 5 minus 12 divided by 4. I look and see that I don't have any more exponents, so I can cross that off. Jumping to multiply and divide, I see that I have a division right here. So I'm going to do 12 divided by 4. I'm going to put that right up here. So 25 plus 5 minus 3. The next thing I look for is more multiplication and division. There is none. So then I'm going to add and subtract and see 25 plus 5 is 30 minus 3, And then finally, finishing up with 30 minus 3 is 27. So for number 2, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to plug in 5 in pink for x, and I'm going to plug in y in teal, the 2 for y. And then I'm going to just put the parentheses around the whole thing and then the square. So I've just replaced the x with the pink, the y with the teal, and then left the rest of it, the shell of it, separately. Now I'm going to do my order of operations again. So starting with my grouping symbols, exponents, and multiply, divide, and then add and subtract. Starting with my grouping symbols, I see that I have parentheses that are a grouping symbol. So that means I need to take care of the inside first. So 5 times 2 is 10. And then I'm going to square that. Now my parentheses are just there, so I don't need any more grouping symbols. I do have an exponent, and that is the 10 squared. So 10 squared is 100. And then I'm done. Remember that both the 5 and the 2 are being squared. So that's why we need to multiply them first, then do our exponent. Remember, grouping symbols always come before exponents. Our next problem says to evaluate each expression, a equals -3 and b equals 4. So I'm just going to plug in -3 for a and 4 for b. I have 3 times 4 minus -3 squared. So now I'm going to apply my order of operations again. First, starting with grouping symbols, I see that I don't have any because there's not multiple operations going on within one of my parentheses, so I don't have any grouping symbols. I do, however, have exponents, so I have a -3 squared. Remember that -3 squared is -3 times -3, which is +9. Then I have no more exponents, so I can cross that off. Now, multiplication and division, I have 3 times 4, so that is 12 minus 9. I have no more multiplication or division, so now I will add or subtract. So I'll do 12 minus 9, which is 3, and then I am done. Never forget to use your order of operations. So always remembering that's always your order, no matter what it is. You try number 4. Here I have worked out, so I plugged in 4 and -3 for A and B where they belong, and then I just started using my order of operations. I was able to see that I did not have any grouping symbols, so I didn't do that step first. I saw that there was an exponent of -4 squared, 4 squared, so I went ahead and got 16 for that. Then I started on my multiplication and division. I started with 2 times 16 to get 32. Then I did 7 times -3 to get -21. This step here is very, very important to watch, and it depends on how you think about it. If you think about this negative as going with a 7, you would do -7 times -3 and get +21. So you would have 32 plus 21. But if you think about the 7 as a positive, you're going to have 7 times -3, which will give you -21, as I did here. But the best part is that negative, remember, will become a positive. So you're really going to do 32 plus 21 anyways. So either way that you think about this problem is correct. You just have to remember that that 21 does eventually become positive to give you a final answer of 53. Lastly, let's talk about number 5 and number 6. They look very similar, but number 5 lacks parentheses while number 6 has parentheses. So going ahead, and I'm going to use pink for x equals 5 and teal for y equals -2, and I'm going to plug them in. So I'm going to have 5 times -2 squared. Going with my order of operations, I don't have any grouping symbols, so I'm going to skip that. I do have exponents though, so I'm going to do -2 squared. -2 squared is -2 times -2, which gives me a +4. I'm then done with my exponents and see that I have some multiplication to do, so that gives me 20. Let's see how number 6 differs from that. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in my x and my y, and then keep my squared on the outside. And then looking at my order of operations, I see that I do have some grouping symbols to start with. So I'm going to start with my 5 times -2 and get -10 squared. Then I see that I'm done with my grouping symbols, but I have an exponent of -10 squared. So -10 squared would be -10 times -10, which is +100. And then I am done. We can see that our answer is not the same. And that's because in the first one, only the y is squared. But in the second one, the entire product is squared. So the x and the y are squared. Whereas in number 5, only the y is squared. So you need to make sure that you're watching your parentheses when you do this. So comparing our answers from 5 and 6, we can conclude that in number 5 only y is squared, but in number 6 the product of x and y is squared. So make sure you get that copied down for number 7. It's really important that you watch parentheses, and if you are using a calculator, making sure to type it in exactly as it's written on your paper. If you've written a parentheses, make sure you insert the parentheses as well. For these problems, knowing your order of operations and working them out by hand is far more efficient than using a calculator if you're not typing it in the calculator correctly. Remember, a calculator can get you a right answer really fast, but it can get you a wrong answer just as quickly. And you may not even know because you didn't recognize that you typed it in wrong. So always remember to think about your order of operations, work through them, and then you will finally get your answer. I'll see you in class.